Hi sewing friends, welcome to my sewing room. My name is Beth, and if you're new, welcome. Some of my old friends know that this is a quilt I've been working on, and yesterday I quilted it and I got you through the quilting, but I still needed to add the binding, so I did that today. I filmed it and here we are. The binding is on and I'm ready to give it away. That's always a good thing. So let's get started. We're going to put some binding on this quilt. The first thing to do after quilting your quilt is to lay it out on the biggest area you can find. I have a cutting table and a larger cutting mat that's helpful. I spread out the quilt as much as I can, making sure there are no folds because I don't want to accidentally cut the quilt. That has happened to quilting friends before, and I remember the story, so I'm always really careful when I spread this out not to have anything underneath my work where I'm cutting there. And I just follow the edge of the quilt top and I cut off the excess batting and backing so that I have a straight edge. And I make sure and roll up those extra strips from the backing and I put them in my scrap basket because those are nice long pieces that I will be using in the future. This is my choice for my binding, and I am going to cut strips enough. This usually fabric's about 42 inches wide, so you do a little math and figure out how long you need your binding to be. And I need about 7 strips for my quilt, so I'm going to cut 2.5-inch strips. Straighten the edge of my fabric, and then I will cut all my binding strips 2.5 inches wide, the width of the fabric. After cutting my strips, I put them together like this, and I sew a diagonal seam. And this fabric doesn't have a front and a back, so I had to be extra careful. It's kind of a woven fabric, so I had to be careful getting the right sides together. And then I sew from one corner to the other corner. And I chain piece, keep it all together. And then when I am done sewing all the strips together, I do a little trimming. After trimming the triangles off and cutting the threads, getting my binding all ready to go, I'll take it to my ironing board and I will press. I'll press it in half, the whole length of the binding, and I will press the seams to the side. I just think it is a little bit sturdier. Some people like to press seams open, but I usually press mine to the side. After pressing, I take it to my machine and I'm going to be attaching the binding to the back of my quilt and rolling it to the front and top stitching. I leave a tail about 12 inches because when I get around I'll be joining my tails, and I just sew along the edge. It's bigger than 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch seam right there, not too close to the edge because you don't want it coming apart. And then before the corner I stop and then I sew off the end, and then I lift my binding and then I fold it down so there's a nice sort of triangle fold there, and when I roll it to the front there'll be a nice edge in the corner and it folds real nice around. So I do that all the way around. So here we are. I have gone all the way around except for these 2 long tails, and right there in the middle, I will fold one and make sure that the other one is long enough. I'll trim, and I'm going to use that extra as my guide, and I'll fold right next to where I cut. I'll open that binding up, and that should be just the size I need, and then cut right along there. So that little extra should be 2.5 inches, because that is the width of my binding. Then I put right sides together at an angle, just like I did when I was joining all the binding strips together. And then I will sew a diagonal line from one corner to the other on my machine. And you really need to kind of push your quilt together to give yourself room to work. I pin it, and then I sew from corner to corner. I always check to make sure that I didn't twist my binding, and I didn't, so that's good. Now I can trim those triangles off. And then I will pin that section down, and I will finish up sewing the binding onto the back of the quilt. We're almost done. We just need to pin the binding, roll it over, pin, and top stitch all the way around, and we will be done. That's all there is to putting binding on a quilt. I hope you'll try this method and let me know how it goes. I'll be sewing here at the end of this video if you want to stick with me. Otherwise, I will see you next time, and thanks for sewing along with me today.